compliance. Come on, that's what they pay attorneys for.
In Shetland, BP operate the oil terminal themselves, and they demand compliance with the highest standards. This is their anti-pollution store. It's got some of the best equipment in the world. It's well maintained and always ready for action. But unlike Alyeska and Valdez, BP and Sulemvo don't pretend that they can deal with a major spill. Here they fight oil slicks in a partnership with Shetland Islands Council, and the strategy's quite clear. Don't let them happen in the first place.
Prevention is as much part of the oil spill industry as cleaning it up. 1 ounce of prevention is worth 1 ton of cure. Equipment and plans are all very well, and they do work undoubtedly, but unfortunately, in the middle of winter time, in the middle of darkness, if you have an incident then first of all, it's very difficult to find it, and secondly, you could endanger the lives of some of your staff.
Shetland's worst nightmare is a loaded tanker hitting these rocks in the approaches to Sulemvo. The weather here is unpredictable and often violent. Visitors from Alaska immediately recognize the similarities, but more significantly, the contrasts.
I guess I have to rate what's happening there on a much higher level than what's happening here. They have a helicopter and sometimes a fixed-wing aircraft that flies out over the North Sea and checks up on these ships to see whether they're supposed to be and whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. We don't do that here in Alaska, but I'll tell you, it pays off.
The spy in the sky makes sure that this tanker stays more than 10 miles off the coast until the final run-in to the terminal. If it should break down and start drifting towards the rocks, there's time to tow it away from danger. Any skipper who takes a shortcut to save money can find himself banned from Sulemvo.
Yeah, that's 20 past off, Dave.
Spindrift, 20 past off the Saudi Splendor. Thank you, Ian.
Port controllers have been tracking this ship for 200 miles. Unlike most of the Coast Guard officers who control the port of Valdez, all these men know what it's like to be in charge on the bridge of a supertanker, because all of them are qualified tanker skippers themselves, and all of them are trained pilots. The harbour won't accept a tanker until its entire life history has been checked out. This one's clean, but if it wasn't, the rogues gallery would show where and when it had spilled oil. Every captain must convince the council and BP that everything's in order. That can take time, and time in this business means big money. It also costs money for the harbour launch to put a pilot on board the tanker before it passes the first reefs in the entrance to the port. They didn't do that in Alaska. Tugs come out to escort the ship before they're really needed. If a tanker's engine or steering should fail in this narrow channel, you've got a potential disaster on your hands, unless you've got plenty of tugs. That's why there are 4 of them here, and a 5th one on standby. In Valdez, there were usually only 2 tugs on duty. And they didn't have the meticulous controls that BP helped to set up in Sulemvo and have imposed on hundreds of tankers here for 12 years.
We don't have a vessel traffic system that, like in Sulemvo, we don't have 30-knot wind restrictions. We used to have 30-knot wind restrictions, but that was based on tankers coming in at a slower rate because the oil was coming at a slower rate. The oil industry didn't build the other 14 tanks that were originally envisioned and originally approved that were necessary to hold the oil that was coming in so that you didn't have to transport oil in bad conditions.
At Sulemvo, they're not under pressure to keep loading whatever the weather. They built enough tanks to store oil from the pipelines for up to a week if the port is closed by storms. As soon as the ship comes alongside, there's a full safety check before they start loading. Oily ballast water is pumped out of the tanker to make room for the cargo and treated until it's clean enough to go back in the sea. Poisonous gas is burnt off safely and cleanly. Sulumvo now meets government pollution standards. Valdez doesn't. It's taken 24 hours to load more than 250,000 tons of oil, and now the ship is ready to sail. British Petroleum helped to design the port control system which will guide this tanker out safely. They approved it as partners with the local council. In Shetland, they take human error into account and plan for it. Sulumvo watches on radar every second of the way. There's a computer monitoring this screen as well as a master mariner. If the tanker strays from the channel, an automatic alarm will sound in the control room. They didn't have this in Alaska on the night that the Exxon Valdez faded from the unwatched radar screens. For 10 crucial minutes, the ship veered wildly off course.
Imagine a divided highway, a freeway, and this tanker was in the southbound lane, and it diverted over towards the northbound lane. So it went across the dividing strip, and it went across the northbound lane, and it kept going. It went across the drainage ditch. It went across the bike path. Hell, it was out in Farmer Brown's field.
If the system that is in place at Sulumvo had been in place at Valdez,
this oil spill wouldn't have occurred. It wouldn't have happened.
positive.
Absolutely. No question about it.
Why?
There'd been a pilot on board that ship. It doesn't matter whether the captain was off the bridge and down in the stateroom for whatever reason. There'd been a pilot on board.
And somebody watching.
Absolutely. There'd been another pilot in the control room watching on radar. There'd also been tug escorts. We don't have the same kind of cooperative attitude that happens at Sulumvo in the Shetland Islands. We don't have that same cooperative attitude. Why? It's the same oil companies. In some cases, the same people.
Why didn't Valdez have the same safety rules as Sulumvo?